Hi everyone, Krista Cowan here with another episode of the Barefoot Genealogist. For those of you who are watching this live, I apologize. It looks like we're having a little bit of technical difficulty, so we're just going to start again at the top. Hopefully you'll stick with us. As always, I'll be available on chat live after the presentation if you have any questions. If you're watching an archived version of this, hopefully it's running smoothly for you, and you can always leave questions on YouTube if you have any comments or questions. We do monitor those. Today we are talking about spelling. That seems like a little bit of a primary subject, but for those of us who are new to genealogy, sometimes we get hung up on spelling. Sometimes we can't understand why we can't find things, and so today we're just going to talk about why things get misspelled. I think sometimes when we understand the why, it helps us overcome some of those challenges, and then we'll talk about what to do specifically, some tips and tricks to overcome some of those challenges to find your ancestors, regardless of how their name may have been spelled. Let's dive in. So let's talk first about why things get misspelled. There's lots of reasons, but here are just a few. First of all, our ancestors a lot of them didn't know how to spell, or read or write for that matter. Spelling, there was no such thing as spelling rules prior to about 1775. And so, and even when some rules started to be established, it was only for those who were educated or who had access to those rules. And so really it wasn't until, the early 1900s that things began to be a little bit more standardized as far as spelling goes. Now my grandmother, she was born in 1922 in a very rural part of Arkansas. She went to school, she went to high school, she was educated, unlike many of her peers. A lot of her peers had to stop school in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade because they had to go to work on the family farm or whatever. My grandmother was able to complete school. However, her whole life, she didn't know how to spell her own middle name. She knew what her middle name was, but she had never seen it written down anywhere. And so she just spelled it a couple of different ways, whenever she had occasion to write it, which wasn't a lot. Our ancestors didn't actually even have an opportunity to write their name. They didn't have a need to do that a whole lot. And so when she had to write it, she just wrote it, however she felt like spelling it at the time. It wasn't until my mother was an adult and got a copy of my grandmother's birth certificate that she was able to actually show her, here's how your middle name is spelled. So they didn't know how to spell. There weren't rules for spelling. If they didn't know how to read or write, they were then at the mercy of other people. So oftentimes other people were writing their name and they just wrote what they heard. And if the person that was doing the writing was from a different place than the person who was saying the name, oftentimes an accent got in the way or things sounded differently. And I'm not even talking just about foreign accents. Sometimes it's even just regional accents. Here in the United States, think about how people from the deep south might sound very different from people from New England. And even in New England, you might have 3 or 4 different really distinct regional dialects or regional accents. And so think about that. Think about where your ancestor was from and what they may have sounded like, how different or similar letters may sound the same. Like a B and a V, those are always easy to confuse when you say something quickly. So keep that in mind. That's one of the reasons why things often get misspelled. Another reason things get misspelled has to do with the transcription of the record itself. So we have these original documents with things written, and then somebody actually has to read that document and type it in so that you can search for it. So when that indexer is transcribing it, sometimes they transcribe it incorrectly. There's a few reasons that happens. One of them has to do with being unfamiliar with old handwriting. And we fall prey to this too. There's that typo again. I keep meaning to change that. The double S often looks like an F, as in Frank, not an S. That double S in old handwriting, oftentimes that first S looks like an F to us. And so things get mistranscribed with that incorrect letter. Another example is the old, what looks to us like a Y, right? But really is a thorn, which is a separate letter altogether, and makes a TH or a th sound. And so, for example, when you see things that say ye old, whatever, shop, you don't really actually pronounce it ye. It's pronounced thee, like T-H-E. That's how we would spell it today. But when we see that old-fashioned Y, sometimes that's how we transcribe it. Think about how that might look if a name was mistranscribed that way. And then as time evolves, it manages to change even the pronunciation of the name, because now that letter means something different to us. Of course, transcribers also sometimes struggle because it's just difficult to read. My last name is Cowan, C-O-W-A-N, but depending on how sloppy or neat the handwriting is, that last vowel oftentimes looks like an E. I've seen it look like a U. And so, the name could be misspelled based on how I spell my name, because somebody misread that last letter. I've actually discovered an entire branch of our family who all descend from the same person just a few generations ago, and they actually spell their name C-O-W-E-N. That's how the whole branch of the family spells their name now. And it's because somewhere somebody decided that was the spelling. And yet in our branch of the family, this is the spelling. And so now we've got relatives with a name that is spelled differently. And yet there is absolutely a connection there. So as things became standardized, people just started or continued to use the same name. I've even seen people where sometimes that spelling changes from one generation to the next. So, maybe somebody was using the surname Brown, B-R-O-W-N-E, and maybe the very next generation just decided that extra E was too much of a hassle because they were always having to say Brown with an E. And so they just dropped it all together. And that happens even today. So again, don't get hung up on spelling. There's lots of reasons, and here are just a few, lots of reasons why things are how we would consider them misspelled. Now, what does that mean for your family history research? As you're doing research, you need to keep all of those reasons in mind, because it's going to affect the way that you search. It's going to affect the way that you look for records. So let's just look at a few tips for how to deal with this. First of all, don't get hung up on spelling. I have spent hundreds and hundreds of hours working with people at conferences and in family history centers and in my home and in their home, where I, especially new people, they come to me and I say, oh, look, I found this record. And they say, oh, that can't be the right person. They spell their name differently. And that's a whole nother group of people. We spell our name this way. And consequently, what they're doing is they're creating their own brick walls, where I could take their family back 2, 3, 4 more generations if they could just get past this idea that our name was always spelled this way. That's just not the fact. And so don't get really hung up on spelling. The next thing is to be creative when you're searching. Just think of all the possible variations. And sometimes it's useful to just grab an old-fashioned pen and paper and just start doodling, right? Write the name across the top of the page as you spell it now, and then just try to come up with all the different variations you can. The example that I like to use is the name Catherine. And we'll see that here in just a minute when I walk through a couple of practical examples with you. But Ancestry.com has over 11 billion records on our website. And so we've created some pretty extensive, what we call name authority dictionaries, where when you do a search, we actually compare what you searched against all these variations. And the name Catherine, now think about all the ways you could possibly think to spell that, we have discovered has over 900 variations. All the different ways that it could be spelled, misspelled, phonetically spelled, the ways that it's spelled in different languages and then sometimes translated into English, all the possible variations of nicknames and their spellings and misspellings, all of those fall under that one name. And so when you do a search for that one name, that's what we're searching. But sometimes it's useful for you to go through that exercise of coming up with your own variations so that you start to recognize those when they come up in your search results. A couple of the tools that Ancestry.com has provided for you are wildcards, and we'll talk about those, and filters, and we'll talk about those as well. Use them so that we can help you with some of those search variations. I certainly don't want to go one by one through all 900 plus of those search variations if I was looking for a relative named Catherine. So use the search filters and the wildcards so that we can give you some of that assistance in that searching. Now let me provide you with a bonus tip in 2 parts. This may sound a little bit silly, and you might even feel a little bit silly if you were to do it, but I have discovered that this has worked, and it has allowed me to break through a lot of brick walls. Try saying the name out loud and write down what you hear. So say it out loud just regularly and write it down. Maybe say it out loud and imagine you're on a telephone. So again, my last name is Cowan, C-O-W-A-N, Cowan. Now if I say that Cowan really fast, I have placed orders over the phone and given my name to hostesses at restaurants, and invariably what they'll write down is Callen, C-A-L-L-E-N, right? Because that's what they hear. That W somehow becomes a double L. And so listen to what it is that you're saying. Then maybe try saying it with an accent. And again, you might feel silly, but if my ancestor was from the Deep South, I might pronounce it a little bit differently. Or if my ancestor was from Boston, I might pronounce it a little bit differently. Or if my ancestor was from England, and maybe even different places in England, right? Or Germany, or wherever, right? So think about how they would have said their name, and then listen and see what you hear when you say that out loud. Another part of this same thing is maybe say it out loud and then ask a child to write it down for you or to tell you how they would spell that name. Again, you might get some really creative spellings that will help you in this process. So let's look at a few examples. This one is very basic, and we're just going to start here. This is actually the last name of a girlfriend of mine, and she and I were working on family history together years ago, and her last name, the way she spells it, is S-I-M-O-N-D-S. And I had actually come across a record for somebody who was spelled S-I-M-M-O-N-S, and she was pretty adamant with me for a little while that couldn't be part of her family because her family had always spelled it with a D. And so, we went back and forth for a little while before she was convinced that, there are a myriad of ways that this name could be spelled. And so here are just a few examples. But again, you have to start thinking about that so that when you come across them, you don't just automatically dismiss them out of hand. So think about that. Think about what that might look like. And then one of the features that we allow you to use on Ancestry.com, one of the filters, is what we call a Soundex filter. For those of you who aren't familiar, the way that Soundex works is we take the first letter of the surname, so in this case it's S, and then we look at the next 3 vowels, or 3 consonants rather, sorry about that, the next 3 consonants. So in this case it's an M, an N, and a D. Okay, in this case, where there's a double M, anytime there's a double letter, it counts as just one letter because it just makes one sound. Soundex is about sounds. So this would still be S, M, and D. Okay. However, this name, it would be S and then M, N, S. So you would actually have to do 2 searches in order to capture all these variations. Okay. So here's where you're going to do that. If I come over here to Ancestry.com, and I just type in S-I-M-O-N-D-S, there's this little filter here, there's a filter below all these fields, and on the surname field you have the option to restrict it to exact, only show me people who spell it this way, or I can just check this little box that says, but add Soundex matches. So anytime so this would catch whether it was a single M or a double M. It would catch it with the S on the end, without the S on the end, okay? So keep that in mind. That's what those filters are for. You can say, only show me things spelled exactly this way, but you might be limiting yourself. Actually, you would be limiting yourself so that you wouldn't be able to necessarily see all the possible variations. But then if you just check that Soundex box, you're going to broaden your search results, get more results, but those more results might contain the one that you're looking for. So in this case, that's just one way to use that filter. Now, let's get a little bit trickier, okay? So the surname Grover, Grover, think about all the different ways it could be spelled or misspelled. And now you're looking at this list and you're going, what? And you may have even seen some of these in your own search results and thought, what is Ancestry thinking? Why are they showing me growers or crowers or crobers, right? Well, the fact of the matter is, think about, again, how it sounds, how it might have been spelled by somebody who didn't know better, how the G might have looked like a C, or the C might have looked like a G, or it may have sounded the same, and B's and V's get mixed up a lot. And sometimes entire vowels get dropped out of names. And sometimes extra vowels get added into names. And sometimes it's not really an extra vowel. What it was if it was translated from German, because we don't have some of the accent marks available in our language, we just add an extra vowel to help create that sound. Sometimes a W, you can't tell if it's a V or a W. Sometimes in some languages a W makes a V sound, right? So these are just a few, I didn't even get an exhaustive list here, a few of the examples of how this one surname might over time have been written all these different ways, and even there may be branches of your family who spell it this way today. Now the problem with this is, remember, SoundX takes the first letter and then the next 3 consonants. Well, you've got 3 first letters here. So there are other things you could do. You could do a SoundX search, or you could do a wildcard search. So let me just clear this form. And I'm actually going to show you a little trick here. Oftentimes when I'm getting ready to do a new search, I will just check this box up here that says match all terms exactly, and then I will uncheck it. What that does is it sets all of my filters back to default. A lot of times you've been playing around with search and one of those tiny little filters may be set to something that you're not sure about. And so I'll just check it and uncheck it, resets everything right back to default. Now I'm going to use, in this case, a wildcard. Okay, so my wildcard in this instance is a question mark. A question mark replaces a single character. Okay, that means that it could start with a C, a G, or a K, and I would find all of those search variants. And then I'm going to mark it exact. Wildcards only work if you're marking things exact. And then I would do this search. So it's going to be question mark, R-O-V-E-R. Now I may have to try that with several different ways. R-O-B-E-R, right? R-O-V-E-R. I may have to add that extra E and try it again, right? But if I've got a list, if I've handwritten a list, I can check those off as I do each of those searches. For some surnames, it might make more sense to use a different kind of wildcard. The other wildcard that we give you access to is an asterisk, which on most keyboards is a Shift 8. Okay, so for example, the name Christensen, I've seen it spelled any number of different ways, and so I could just put the first part of the word and then an asterisk, and an asterisk replaces multiple characters. So it would catch every E-N, I-N, S-O-N, S-E-N, any possible variation of that spelling of anything that comes after the first part of that word. And again, I'm going to mark that exact. So a question mark replaces a single character, and an asterisk replaces multiple characters. Again, this is a little bit more complicated because you'll have to do multiple searches, but it's worth it because you never know how that record may have been spelled. Now let's talk about given names for just a minute. I talked about the name Catherine just a moment ago. This was my first take at trying to create my own list of possible spelling variations for the name Catherine. It can be spelled with a C or a K. It can be spelled with a TH or just a T. It can be spelled with an I-N-E. It can be spelled, there's lots of different ways, right? And then of course you have all the nicknames, Kathy, Kitty, Cat, Rena, like all these possible, right? Oh, somebody just went, Rena, what? Okay, not always is a nickname derived from the first part of the name. So again, something to think about. Create a list. You can just type in Catherine and let Ancestry.com do the search magic for you. That's what happens when you use that default setting. is that we are comparing it against our name dictionary to return results to you. Or if you want to control your search, you have the opportunity to do that. You can restrict to exact, which just means it will only show you people named Catherine spelled exactly that same way. Or you can add phonetic matches, which is what I would do if I was doing this particular search. So that way I would only get women named Catherine, but it would include all the K spellings of that. It would include any vowel variations in there. Names with similar meanings would also provide or add all of the possible nicknames then to that list. And then your third option here, which doesn't really fit with today's topic, but just to let you know what it says records where only initials are recorded. And keep in mind that happens. I have seen many records, particularly marriage records for some reason, where only the first and middle initial of the person is recorded. And so I could search for Catherines for days, but unless I'm willing to look at people whose initial is just recorded as a C, then I might miss it altogether. Again, I can use wildcards in this field. So another example I like to use, my grandfather's name is Fred. My grandmother always called him Freddie. I was never sure whether she was spelling that Freddie or Freddy. His father's name, and they thought for years he was a junior, his father's name was Frederick, and he even spelled his name a few different ways. Sometimes it was Frederick, sometimes it was just Frederick without that E in the middle. Sometimes the CK at the end became a CH. So, his mother was German, and so sometimes, when she said things, the name kind of sounded a little bit differently. It might sound like it had extra vowels, or so just, again, think about that. And then I would just do a search with Fred and then an asterisk, and mark that exact, and what that would return is all those spelling variations for anything that came after that D in that name. Really helpful to help you narrow your search, but not narrow it so much that you're missing out on certain things. Okay, the last thing that I just want to share with you today has to do with when it's not a spelling issue. And it's kind of a little bit off topic, but not really, when you start to think about reasons why you're getting certain search results and reasons why you might need to be a little bit more creative. So here's just two very simple examples. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds more, but the name Marguerite, you may get a search result when you say show me names with similar meanings or spellings, or when you just do a default search, you may see the name Daisy show up on your list. Well, the name Daisy shows up on your list because they mean the same thing. Same with the surname Zimmerman. Zimmerman is the German word for carpenter. And so again, you may see something totally off the wall. You may think, why is Ancestry.com returning this in my search results? Well, it's because they are names with similar meanings. Somebody who was a Blanco may have become a White. Lots of different examples of that. But keep that in mind when you're looking at your search results and the possible things that show up, that it's not really a spelling issue. It could be a translation issue. That's all we have time for today. Hopefully your mind has just been expanded a little bit about the possibilities for searching and the possible different ways that you can search and the variations that could exist. Hopefully you won't dismiss some search results out of hand. Maybe you'll look at them a little closer next time and think maybe this really is your person. Hopefully maybe you also won't restrict your searches so much that you're missing the records that you're looking for. If you have any questions, as always, I will be available on chat immediately following this presentation. If you're watching an archived version of this, you can leave a comment on YouTube. We do monitor those. If you have suggestions for topics you'd like to see discussed in future live stream broadcasts, please email me at ask@ancestry.com. If you include a little bit about your research question and your challenge, it helps me to formulate presentations that are a little bit more directed to what it is that you want to hear about. And then you can always check the Ancestry.com Facebook page, click on the events tab there, and you can see the list of topics, dates, and times.